Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's live discussion. Got some visual aids today. This one is how to use your late talkers' messages to help them talk. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive speech and language pathologist. And today on this video, I'm going to answer 4 questions for you. The first one is, how do parents know what late talkers are communicating? Whoops, I missed one. How do late talkers communicate? Actually, that's going to be first. So this got all goofed. How do late talkers communicate is first, and then, oh my boy. How late? You know what, y'all? I'm so sorry. What a crazy live. I thought it was going to be all organized today with these great visual aids. Today I'm talking about how late talkers, how you can use nonverbal messages to help your late talkers share their messages with the world. Oh my goodness. Let's start over. Oh my goodness. So all of you for live, let me get it straight because I really do have it good and I have it all organized for you, I promise. All right. So starting over again. This topic today is going to be about how to use your late talkers' messages to help them talk. And the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is how do late talkers communicate? And then I am going to tell you about how parents know what late talkers are communicating. And then I'm going to talk about how late talkers learn words. How do late talkers learn words? And then I am going to talk about how to turn those nonverbal messages that late talkers use into words. All right. Once again, my name is Marcy Melzer, and I'm an intuitive speech and language pathologist. And I see that there are some people who joined me on this live. Anne-Marie and Christy and Jenna and Erica and Tomas is here. Thanks so much for joining me today on this live. This is going to be a really cool strategy session almost, where I'm giving you some ideas about really how to dig in and help your child learn to transfer that nonverbal communication that they're using with you into verbal communication. So the first thing I'm going to talk about with all my visual aids here, get them all straight, is, again, how do late talkers communicate? And the answer to that question is that late talkers communicate non-verbally. So what we know about late talkers is that they definitely have things they want to let you know, and they're using nonverbal messages to communicate those things to you. Obviously, they're not using words, they're late talking. So what I'm going to tell you now is kind of what happens in the progression of expressive language. Okay, so these are kids, and this happens with every child as they progress in expressive language, because kids come out of the womb already communicating things to us. So how it all starts with children from birth on. And I'm teaching you this progression because it's really important that we understand how language evolves, and that your child may need to move through some of these stages in order to be able to get to regular verbal language communication. So the first stage of progression of expressive language that babies have from the very second they come into the world is crying or whining. So this is the most rudimentary way for all children to communicate expressively. They communicate the very basic things that they need to communicate to their parents. They're hungry, they're cold, they're uncomfortable for whatever reason, they're tired, they want to sleep, those things. So when the very first stage is going to be whining and crying, and if your child is using those things, they definitely are communicating probably at the root level. Just like with babies, they're communicating, they're crying, that they're uncomfortable. If your 4 or 5 or 6-year-old is crying as one of their communication methods that they're using to communicate, then that's going to be really basic level stuff, like they're really frustrated or they're communicating feelings or core level comfort to you. Okay, and so then the next stage that kids move up is screaming and tantrums, which is another thing that kids use as a nonverbal way to communicate, which actually is more sophisticated than the whine and cry. The whine and cry really requires you as a parent to interpret everything that the child is feeling from very core level. And then the screaming and tantrum, they're really letting you know how they feel. Like a cry is going to be like, they expect you to sort of figure it out, but a tantrum about something in a situation or screaming in response to some kind of reaction, that's going to be a definite communication of someone who is frustrated or unhappy about that circumstance, but it definitely is a communication. All of these nonverbal things are ways your child is using to communicate. So the next thing is hitting and aggression. This, again, it seems like a behavior, but it actually is a nonverbal communication. So if you're giving your child a choice and they push one of those things away, or whenever someone comes into their space or you try to interact them and go give them a hug and they whack you, or they're being aggressive outwardly, like approaching someone else and being aggressive, these are ways that your kids are communicating. And so here's another one. As it moves up the ladder, as more sophistication happens, then kids get to be using gestures and pointing more. This is where kids might point or even just use a hand to wave or indicate in a direction of something that they want, or they'll point at you if they want you to be interpreting their messages. Rudimentary gestures, they point to their mouth when they want something to eat. They don't mean anything specifically, they just kind of are a general gesture to let you know that they want something. As kids' communication gets more sophisticated, then the gestures get more sophisticated, and so they do that. And then expressively, kids will move to environment sounds. So these are just the noises that they hear, and they might try to say them. For example, they'll call every cow moo, or they'll call all the cars vroom vroom, because those are the noises that they make when they're sort of referring to things in general, not a specific thing necessarily, but usually a category. All the animals might be moo, or things like that. And developmentally, they're moving up. And kids sometimes can use these environment sounds really specifically. So they might just, call, and you get to understand them and interpret them. But that is one thing that children use as a nonverbal way to communicate when they don't have words. And then the next thing they do is this practice talking, I'm calling it. And that is characterized by the speech sounds, the buzz and does and muzz and the letter sounds or things like that you hear that don't really represent words yet. So they're kind of practice. It's things that kids have heard that they're saying when they're on their own. It might even have inflection that sounds like speech. I get a ball. I get a bus. You might hear a few little things like that, or they could be not even really using speech sounds and just inflection, like, like that. Those are kind of practice talking where they're actually trying to be imitating some of the speech that they've heard somewhere, and they're trying to do it on their own. A lot of times kids will use this practice talking just on their own when no one is listening. That's why I like to call it practice talking, because they sort of get going with it. All right, so that's how late talkers are communicating, because if they're not using words, they definitely are using nonverbal communication. And so what we need to understand next is, how do parents actually know what their late talkers are communicating? Like, how do they know if it's not words and they're using these nonverbal things? How do parents know exactly what their kids want? So the first thing that parents do is you look at the behavior. So if your child is somewhere along that progression of nonverbal that we talked about, if they are crying, or if they are pointing, or if they're, some sort of nonverbal behavior is communicating something to them, the parents first look at that behavior to get an indication. If a child's pointing to their mouth, they probably want food. If they're going to the kitchen, they probably want food. If they're grabbing at the parent's phone, they probably want the phone. So the first step that they do is they actually look at the behavior. Look at the behavior, first thing they do. And then what they do is they remember previous requests. So the last time your child went to the kitchen and touched that cabinet, they wanted a cookie. So, you're remembering they're doing that behavior because they, are communicating something to you by that behavior. And you remember the last time they did that behavior, they wanted this. So that's what you're doing, is you're actually remembering their previous requests or the things that they wanted before. And that's what you do next. And then you also, if that doesn't work, if the first two don't work, then you look for environmental clues. And that could be, your child is uncomfortable and they're fussy, and you smell the environment and you say, they must have a dirty diaper. So there's one way you figure things out. Or the one toy that your child always plays with isn't in its spot. That's another environmental clue. Of course, then your child may be very outward environmental clues, like they actually drag you to the thing that they want, or they bring to you something like a spoon when they want to eat. Those environmental clues, the things that you're using, that you look around you, that's how you try to figure out what they want. And then ultimately, you use your intuition and guess, because they haven't given you exactly what they want. But in absence of them pointing exactly to or bringing you the phone that they want or whatever, you use your intuition to figure out what it is that they want, and then you make a guess. And usually you confirm it, with them. So that's how parents know what kids want. And, this idea of using your intuition is, where a lot of parents end up going wrong, is because they look at those first couple things and they assume what a child wants, but instead of, and then the guess is wrong. And that takes the child back to that frustration behavior, because whatever nonverbal things they used, the gestures, the pointing, the dragging you, the whatever, if you've made it through to that last step, and then you don't know exactly what they want still, and you have to guess, and whenever you rely on that guess alone, you always have a chance of being wrong. And whenever you're wrong from that guess, your child doesn't necessarily know. Now listen carefully to this. When you're wrong on a guess, your child doesn't know the difference between whether you understood their message and you don't want to comply with it, or you didn't understand their message. And they automatically assume, because the things that they have communicated that they couldn't have, like they want the phone so bad, they're trying to pry it out of your hand, and you don't want them to have it, and you say, no, you can't have the phone now. And then that goes into some kind of crazy behavior because the child wants the phone, you can't have the phone. You don't know how to work through that situation. What happens when you guess what a child wants is they go back to that. They remember, just like you remember the last time they grabbed the phone, they wanted it. They remember when you didn't let them have it and they got upset before, and they go back to that upset stage. And then you haven't figured out what it is exactly they want, because they just lose it thinking that it's not that you didn't understand, because potentially if you did understand what they wanted, you would give it to them. But they assume that you didn't understand, just like you assume they wanted a cookie when they actually wanted a gummy bear or something like that. So using your guessing is not going to be your best always bet. And it always breaks down for families, because the more you rely on yourself to interpret or guess what that message is, the less chance you actually have of knowing exactly what the message is. So remember, kids are communicating non-verbally, and parents know what that message is by using those other clues first, always. And then they always use intuition as your last resort, because obviously you're going to use the info you have instead. And so ultimately, we want to turn those behaviors that we don't understand, or we understand consistently or inconsistently, into words ultimately. And so what we need to understand next is, how do late talkers actually learn words? Because if they don't have words to communicate, how do we teach them? How do they learn words? How do they learn the words that they do know, that they do try? Okay? And so we're going to go through that right now. And the thing is that kids learn the words that they hear a lot. Okay? They have to hear words over and over and over again in order for them to input them into their memory banks, so that later, when they need them to communicate their messages instead of these nonverbal things that they're using, so later when they do that, they have access to them. But first, they have to learn the words to put them in their little memory banks before they can use them functionally. So they have to hear them over and over again in order to get them into their memory banks. And so kids learn the words that they hear a lot. And so you have to ask yourself, how does your child hear the most words? And so late talkers often get taught words by hearing them over and over and over again in therapy, right? And in therapy, they're going to use pictures like flashcards or toys or sign language to represent the words that they're teaching your child. So they're going to teach them a sign for eat, or they're going to show them a word, a picture of a banana to teach the word banana, or maybe even an object, a plastic banana, to teach the word banana. And they're going to teach the vocabulary over and over and over again by getting your child to, label those things, identify those things, and they're going to say those words over and over and over. So that's one way that late talkers learn words. All right. And so the other way that kids learn words is from video and TV. And most of the kids that know very little other words, but they know numbers, they know words to songs, and they know movie lines, they've learned those things from the video and TV, okay? And because they've watched the same video and TV over and over and over again, and they've heard those words or phrases a lot. And those words and phrases get in your memory banks faster and easier when there is some kind of another experience with them. So if they're watching a video and there's lots of excitement in that video, then that's going to help them actually pay closer attention to the words. So that's how they're bringing the words into their memory banks, okay? So, and then what happens, unfortunately, is that when kids are inputting words from therapy that they learned from signs and pictures or from video and TV, later when they need them to replace the nonverbal things, then they make inaccurate word choices, okay? So they maybe were really excited when they saw on TV somebody who said, "Let's go," in, a Paw Patrol cartoon or something like that, and that really was cool. So now your child always says, "Let's go," just like that whenever they want to go bye-bye. But they also say, "Let's go," when they want to eat something, because whenever they do that, that makes you react. So you said, "Let's go," and then they left, and so then they want to use that phrase again when they want something to eat, because it made you act when they wanted to go. They don't really know that it means "let's leave" or "let's get out of here." They just learned it as a shtick, a word, a vocabulary that they put in their file cabinet at a time that had a lot of emotion that goes with it. So the thing is that the other time that kids, late talkers, learn language from language facilitator parents is they learn those words from their parents during everyday life. And so when you learn those words during your everyday activities that you do a lot, and you say those words a lot because you do those things a lot, then your kids hear those words a lot. And when they hear them from you in those natural situations, then they learn the right words at the right time. So instead of learning that a banana is called a banana because you saw a picture of it in therapy when you were working on vocabulary of fruits, and you learned this at the same time you learned that a watermelon's a watermelon and an apple's an apple and all of that stuff, then later on, when you're presented with a real banana, when your child is presenting them with a real banana, and you ask them to say banana, they have to go in their file cabinet and think back to the picture of the banana that they learned in their therapy session and try to remember that that word is the same as the banana in your hand that might be a little bit different color. Maybe it's a little bit more spotty because it's been on your counter for a couple of days, and it's not the bright yellow banana that they took a picture of for the picture card that they use in therapy. It's a different kind of looking banana, and your child doesn't necessarily know. But if you have a banana every day, like many kids like, or a half a banana every day, because banana every day can kind of muck things up. Anyway, so if your child eats a banana every day and you have different bananas in your house, and every day you say banana when your child's eating banana, then they're going to learn the word banana in that natural circumstance. And the next time that you talk about it, then they're going to have it in their file cabinet in the emotional time that it was where they actually got to eat a real live banana. And so what now you need to do is, as parents, you have these two situations. Now we know how kids learn words, all right? And first we learned how kids do communicate. They communicate with those nonverbal messages. And our goal as language facilitator parents is try to turn those nonverbal messages into words. And so what we're going to talk about right now is how you can turn those nonverbal messages they have into words. And this is the process that you're going to do, okay? So the first thing is, when your child is using one of those nonverbal messages that we talked about before, whether it's at the very root level, crying, whining like that, or all the way up to using the wrong word choice, okay? You have to know, what does it mean? And that goes back to that, how do you know what your child means? You have to look at the behavior. You have to make sure that all those things that we talked about, going back to, you have to you look at their behavior, and you have to understand their environment and what's going on and figure it all out, okay? But what you're going to do is you're going to stop short of the guessing part, okay? Because you want to know, what does it mean in the real world, this child's behavior? And we don't want to rely on guessing, because what we're going to do is we're going to end up interpreting those messages. So here's a good way to guess if you're actually getting the right information, or if you're relying on your intuition and guessing completely. And that is, would the babysitter understand your child's communication right now? And so if your child's giving you a nonverbal communication and you're relying on, oh yeah, you're remembering the choices that they made before, and you're relying on them to show you exactly what it is, and you're relying on those other things to get it, if that babysitter knew your child and they knew their previous choices, and they knew, where their favorite toy is located, and they knew all of that stuff, then potentially they could also understand that message. But if this is a new babysitter that your child never knew, then you need to ask yourself, this behavior that my child is displaying right now, would the babysitter understand what my child's trying to communicate? Now, if your child's having a tantrum because you took the phone away, they probably would, and that's what they're using to communicate that behavior or that feeling, okay? So what you do next is you have to make sure that you get the exact message so that, in fact, the babysitter would understand what that message is, because that's the only way to know exactly what the message is to get your child to communicate the message to you exactly like they would have to communicate it with someone who didn't know them at all. All right. Now, they aren't going to want to try to do that as much. Obviously, if they did, they would be using words or another way. But if you're having trouble understanding them, you have to do your best to get them to communicate the exact message. And how you're going to do that is you're going to resort back down the progression. So if they're at the up high end and they're using a word that doesn't mean what they're trying to say, you have to go back a step or two and have them go to gestures and have the gestures show you what they're doing. And if the gestures they're using aren't communicating to you what they want, you have to go back to actually having them physically take you to and use the environment or show you or bring you the activity. You have to rely on it. If you prompt your child to try to say what you are guessing that they want, you're just going to continue to emit this frustration that they just don't get what you say. So the first step is you must get your child to show you, pantomime, sign, whatever it is. Use their iPad if they're using their communication. Dial it back to using exactly what they can tell you, exactly what they want, where you're like, oh, now I know exactly what this is. It's not a, is it this? Do you want this? No, no, no. Your idea in your head should be, you want this. And then you interpret that message out loud. So when you interpret that message, if your child is upset because they don't have get the phone, then you have to interpret that message out loud. You're upset. No phone now. Bummer. And if your child wants a gummy bear after you brought everything out of the cabinet and they finally show you the gummy bear, you're like, oh, you want a gummy bear. Gummy bear, please, because what you're interpreting is the message that your child is going to tell you the next time, hopefully. And if not the next time, then the following time. And if not that time, then the following time. But the thing is, you're going to interpret the message and then say it out loud. So if you know for sure, finally, because the child is holding the gummy bear in their hand and bringing it to you, that they want a gummy bear, finally, Eureka, we figured it out, you say, gummy bear, please. You don't say, oh, you want a gummy bear? Say gummy bear. You just interpret the message out loud and say, gummy bear, please. You can show them that you know and acknowledge that you do understand. And that's the other thing. Instead of saying, do you want this? Do you want this? And if you do say, do you want this? And then they give you that acknowledgement like that, then what you do is you acknowledge, don't acknowledge yes, acknowledge I want gummy bear, because that is the message that you want to hear, the next thing. So say gummy bear, please. Or, oh, you want gummy bear. Gummy bear, please. And then the trick is you interpret the message out loud and you only use 2 to 3 words, okay? If you get too long in your explanation, remember that's not the message that your child could communicate. Right now, they're not using any words at all, okay? They're using pointing. They're pointing to the cabinet and making noises, and you're trying to figure out in your head that they want the gummy bears in there. So you have to go through them showing you exactly what it is that they want to the point that they're holding the gummy bear, and then you say, gummy bear, please. Don't say, oh, you want gummy bear? Okay, this is gummy bear blue. Don't get into all of it. The message your child was trying to communicate non-verbally is gummy bear, please, or snack, please, or I'm hungry, or come with me. Because when your child is coming to get you from the couch to drag you in the kitchen because they want a cookie, you know that in your head and you're guessing it. But by them dragging you, face value, the babysitter would never understand what that means. Okay? So at the time that your child is dragging you up from the couch, you have to interpret that message. That message means get up in 2-3 words. Not, oh, you want a cookie? Let's go to the kitchen and get a cookie. You don't know they want a cookie. You just know they want to get you up from the couch. So that's what you do. All right? So that's what you do. You use these 2 to 3 word phrases, and here is the secret, okay? The super duper secret that language facilitators do, that is that this is what you do. No, zero expectation of imitation. You use a 2 to 3 word phrase and you don't expect your child to imitate it, okay? You don't expect them to say cookie please before you give them the cookie. When you figure it out, if you think about yourself as an interpreter, pretend the invisible babysitter is standing there next to you and you're thinking in your head, oh, he wants a gummy bear, but you don't know that. And you can't be there to interpret for the babysitter. So you would say, how can I get him to communicate this, that he wants it? You'll have to have him show you or bring you or something like that. But if he's standing right there and you're guessing, you have to interpret exactly what the message is. And that's how you're able to get your child from that nonverbal communication into verbal communication, is by serving as their interpreter and modeling that phrase in just a 2 to 3 word phrase, because they never could imitate it before. And you don't expect them to imitate it, because at this stage of the game, you are filling up those file cabinets. And your child will use those words, I promise you, just like they're using the ones they have in there inaccurately. When you show them the right words at the right time, when they are communicating those messages in the moment, during the things that you communicate all the time, then your child is filling their file cabinets with the right vocabulary and they know the right time to use it. So the next time you model it, or the next time you're trying to confirm what your child wants, just ask them the question, what do you want? And if they can't tell you, then they're gonna pull out some kind of nonverbal way to answer that question. And then you interpret that answer into the words that you want to hear the next time. And the next time you know that they want a gummy bear because they're standing in front of the cabinet, you ask the same question, what do you want? And that alone is the prompt for the answer that you've previously taught them. So this is the long-term plan. I mean, long-term meaning if you do this enough, if you do this today, by the end of the week, your child is going to start to say the words that you need them to say when you ask them that question, what do you want? Or whatever. If they want you to stand up, then that's the word that you tell them. If they want you to follow them to the kitchen so that you can show them something, that's what you model. Follow me. Come with me. Grab, if they bring you a bowl, you can say, oh, you have a bowl. Want to eat? And then they might give you a confirmation and you can say, okay, eat please. But you don't have any food. Come show me what food you want. And then go through the whole process. Give them the words for everything they see. I see Deanna's here and Brianna's here. Thanks for saying hi. And Bariana. And it says, my son recently pushed the pit inside his nose and he took my hand and pointed with his finger to his nose to show me he has a cherry pit inside his nose. Scary and realistic, obviously. If he hit his head, He will show me how he fell. You just have to pay attention and they will communicate that way. I love how you explain this. Oh, good. So, yep, so her son definitely let her know that he had a pit in his nose after he stuck it in there. And there's Shafakse. Shafakse says hello. I hope that this video helped you understand a little bit how now you can interpret your child's nonverbal messages into verbal language. But in order for them to do it, see, late talkers missed that time. They didn't hear regular, natural language with repetition the first go around. For whatever reason, they are late talking. They weren't able to listen. They weren't able to hear during those key developmental times. And they missed it the first time. And so what's really important is that you are filling those file cabinets with the right words at the right time so that later on, your child in the right time is going to be able to access the right words. And that is literally the secret that I teach nearly every family in my Waves of Communication program on our first session, is that they have to get past that intuition that they, are relying on to interpret their kids' messages and show them how to bring those nonverbal messages out into the world. And that's how I help parents teach their late talking children how to share the words in their head, their words, their wisdom that they have, all of their nonverbal messages, how to share those things with the world. So, and great. And Deanna said, he said, I eat breakfast when he was hungry. Even if it wasn't at breakfast time, he knew before that those words kind of go together and he'd learned them another way. And in language facilitation, Deanna, you can just model the correct message for when he's hungry, which is, I am hungry. And that's the message that hopefully you'll get the next time he says, what do you want? So, all right. Thanks again for joining me on this live. I'm going to try to keep these videos a little bit shorter. I know that a lot of families are busy, and I get kind of long-winded, but I want to explain things carefully so that you can understand. So if you know somebody else who can use this video to help their child learn to mold their nonverbal communication into words, please share it with other families. And I appreciate you watching today. And I'll see you next time for my next live video discussion on language facilitation. Have a great day, everybody.